Hi, I'm Sparrow, and I'm a science communicator with a background in behavioral science and pedagogy, which is the science behind teaching. Today's topic is the flat earth. We're going to go over where the idea came from, why people believe it today, and how you can determine for yourself whether or not the earth is flat or globular. Globular? Spheroid. Let's get into it. The idea of flat earth is as old as humanity, just about. The ancient Near East, also known as the cradle of civilization, gave birth to a number of religions that shared the same basic cosmology. Cosmology, of course, meaning the idea of how everything in existence came to exist. That idea was that there was a creator who pulled all of the ingredients out of a sort of cosmic soup and created the world, separating the waters of the sky from the waters of the land and establishing a physical barrier between the two, which is known as the firmament. If that sounds familiar to you, it should, because it's the same basic cosmology as is shared by three of the biggest religions on the earth today, those being Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. There are two versions of the flat earth ideology. The first being an infinite plane that extends in all directions forever, and the second being what globe earthers refer to as Pancake Earth, which is a flat disk underneath a dome called the firmament. By around 600 BC, or about 2,500 years ago, people started moving away from this idea that the earth was flat, and by about 2,000 years ago, basically nobody believed that anymore. However, we're here today because people have started believing it again, and I wanted to talk about why. The 1800s saw a resurgence in the idea of a flat earth, in part due to some sort of celebrities who were into the idea, which falls under what I consider the trusted source fallacy. What the trusted source fallacy basically is that when you trust a person, you automatically trust what they say. But the way humans build trust is kind of counterintuitive because it's based on how much you see of someone and how often you hear about them rather than how trustworthy they actually are, which is why people tend to trust celebrities despite knowing nothing about them as a person. In the 1800s, the celebrities of Flat Earth were Samuel Rowbotham, also known as Parallax, Lady Elizabeth Bluth, William Carpenter, and John Jasper. Parallax was a cult leader. He wanted to build a utopia, and he would give lectures and publish writings and invite people to stay at his utopian village. One of the main tenets of his belief system was that the world was flat, and so he very aggressively promoted this idea. Lady Elizabeth Bluth, possibly Blouth, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, she was nobility, she was a socialite, she was kind of a celebrity, and she was a follower of Parallax. And so after his death, she continued to promote the idea that the earth was flat. Another big promoter was William Carpenter, who was an author. He published many works discussing the topic and made a name for himself and a lot of money for himself doing so. The last of the big four that I found to be very influential in the flat earth movement of the 1800s was John Jasper. John Jasper was a formerly enslaved person who became a preacher, and he was a Bible literalist, meaning he believed every word of the Bible was specifically, accurately fact. No metaphors, no allegories, facts. So he was a big promoter of the idea that the earth was flat because that was the exact verbiage in the Bible. And he gained a lot of following for this, and a lot of people took on his ideas of Bible literalism. By the late 1800s, people had started moving away from flat earth ideology again. And it didn't make another comeback until the mid-90s. There were several factors that influenced this 1990s comeback, the main one being technology. People were able to access the internet, which was this amazing source of information, but we're also becoming aware that the information on the internet wasn't always true. In addition to this, we developed the ability to make computer-generated images, CGI, and animations and 3D modeling, and it became possible to fake things. The combination of internet distrust and growing ability to computer-generate fake imagery led to a big distrust of anything that couldn't be directly observed, experienced, or replicated by individuals, which actually is a good thing from a scientific standpoint. However, it opened a door for a lot of conspiracy theory mindset. And conspiracy theories tend to promote three really big ideas. And I'm going to pause because my dogs are being crazy, so give me one sec. This is Latte. She's the crazy one, and she's instigating the others to be bully during my video. Latte, why you do this? Why you be a crazy girl? The three big themes of conspiracy theories are that the education system is brainwashing children, that the government is paying science organizations to lie to you, and that there is a global anti-religion movement behind both of these things. So those are the three that most conspiracy theories share. In the modern era, there are tons of flat earth promoters. I'm saying flat earth promoters and not flat earth believers because those are two different things. There are people who genuinely believe that the earth is flat. However, those aren't the people who are making money off of it. And I wanted to talk about those people instead. Flat earth is a lucrative lie. To give you an idea of just how lucrative, I did some research into various specific media that I knew of about the flat earth and how much it was generating. And what I found was that there wasn't a lot of information online about it. Because you see, when you sell a book, you can decide whether or not you want it publicly available, how many copies have sold. And the same is true for movies and other merchandise. So instead, I did my best and I came up with a few numbers I think are pretty good at showing you really what we're dealing with. Flat earthers host conventions periodically across the world in various big cities, and they sell tickets to these conventions as well as merch at the conventions, as well as books and movies and audiobooks and so on and so forth. And the nearest convention to where I live is the Denver Flat Earth Conference. Tickets to the Denver Flat Earth Conference are about $350, and the first conference had only 400 attendees, while each subsequent conference has been larger. Hey, Editing Sparrow here. I realized I totally forgot to talk about vendors and the fees that vendors pay to be at conventions. So in addition to tickets for attendees and the actual income from various forms of merch, people organizing these conventions are getting those vendor fees, and the people speaking at conventions are getting lecture fees. I felt like that was important to include, so sorry, no makeup face, messy hair, but here you go. That's a lot of money. In addition to this, the biggest flat earth book, the most well-known, is 200 Proofs That the Earth is Not a Ball, written by Eric Dubay, which currently sells for $70 on Amazon. These people are taking donations towards various supposed experiments they intend to run, or just towards promoting the cause, and they also often have online media, which includes ad revenue, such as YouTube videos. There's dozens of flat earth YouTubers who have varying levels of fame, and all of them are grifting. And I say that with confidence because there are so many different experiments you can do in your own home, in your own yard, with very little financial cost to you, very little preparation, and very little background in science required, that will quickly prove that the Earth is not a pancake, is not an infinite plane, but rather is a spheroid with specific calculable dimensions and behaviors that can be predicted over time. So now, let's talk about those. The turning points in globe theory was the calculation of the Earth's circumference by Eratosthenes in literally ancient times, using no calculators, because they weren't invented yet, no computers, because they weren't invented yet, and no tape measure, because it wasn't invented yet. He was able to calculate the circumference of the Earth to within 700 miles, which sounds like a big margin of error. But when the Earth is more than 25,000 miles in circumference, that is just a blip. He did this a way that you can actually do it yourself right now if you're interested, which is he got 2 poles, he set them up outside, and he waited until the sun was directly above one of them, as in 0 shadow. With the sun directly above, he measured the angle that the sun was hitting the second pole at, used that to calculate the fractional arc that this distance represented, and then multiplied that fraction by the distance between the 2 points in order to achieve a circumference. Like I said, you can do that yourself. You can do it in your backyard. You don't have to put them super far apart. The farther apart they are, the more accurate your measurement and calculation is going to be. But you can literally do this in your backyard today. Another experiment that is easily replicable is nicknamed the Bedford Level experiment. Bedford Level is a river. Rather, it is a specific section of a river that was very flat and very straight and very slow moving, so that at certain times of the year it was basically just a lake, which made it perfect for this experiment. But you can do it any place that is actually flat and level. The premise of the experiment was simple. You stick a big old pole at one end, you go to the other end and you look at it. That's it. That's the whole experiment. And so what they did is they put the big pole there, they looked at it, and they determined, can I see the whole thing, or can I only see part of it? If the Earth is flat, you'll be able to see all the way down to where it's stuck in the ground. And to make this easier, you can use something like a yardstick, which actually has measurements, or you can stripe it with colored paint. If the Earth is round, you won't be able to see the whole thing. There'll be a section of it that's eclipsed by the horizon line, and that will depend on how far away from it you are, and going farther will eclipse more of it. With this experiment, what was interesting is the first guy who did it was a flat earther, and he stated that he could see the whole pole, therefore Earth is flat. The second guy who did it was a globe earther, and he stated, well, I can only see 2/3 of the pole, therefore the Earth is round. So this is one that I strongly encourage you to try for yourself. Another experiment you can do, or rather more of an observation, is, I have it in my notes as stationary stars. We all know about the North Star. We don't really care about that right now. Instead, I'd like to encourage you to go outside at night and look at constellations. And take a picture of the constellations if you'd like. Because if the Earth is flat, everybody will see the constellations the same way. They'll be tilted at the same angle. They'll be the same height up from the ground. You're going to see the same thing as me, or as somebody in Europe, or as somebody in Australia. But if the Earth is a globe, everybody's going to see something a little bit different. And that'll also change seasonally and throughout the night. And you'll see them at different angles. And some will be partially obscured by the ground, while someone else might see the whole thing. And there'll be constellations that you or I can't see, but a third party might. So I would encourage you to try that one out yourself. Another proof of the globe Earth is the lengths of days. At the equator, the length of a day across the year is going to be pretty close to the same. But if you live somewhere very far north or very far south, you're going to see days that lengthen and shorten based on seasons. And this is the idea behind the current Midnight Sun experiment, or rather expedition, that is being planned right now. For those who don't know, the Midnight Sun expedition that is currently being planned is a collaboration between Flat Earth and Globe Earth. And the idea is that big names in both Flat and Globe Earth communities will physically go to Antarctica and see if they can see the midnight sun, see if there's a 24-hour sun specifically, which would of course prove that the Earth is a globe. If they can, Earth's a globe. If, however, the day length in Antarctica is normal, so somewhere between 8 and 12 hours, the same as everywhere else, that will indicate that the Earth is not a globe. So pay attention to that. Hopefully that'll happen. Currently, the holdup on that is getting flat earthers to agree to join the expedition, as I believe it's up to 8 of them now that have been asked and refused. Another way that you can prove a globe Earth for yourself is by use of a sundial. Now, you could go online and buy a sundial. They sell them on Amazon for a pretty reasonable price. However, you can also just make one with a stick and some rocks in your own backyard, which I'd highly recommend you do because it's kind of fun. All you need is to stab that stick in the ground, and then once an hour, every hour, go outside and put a rock wherever the tip of the shadow is. For additional fun, have some friends who live at least 20 minutes away from where you live do the exact same thing, and then at specific times the next day, take a picture and show each other where your sundial's shadow is pointing. See, we track time using clocks, but originally there was solar time, and I feel like I'm coming off this a little crooked, but you know what? We're just going to go for it. Before the invention of clocks, people used sundials, and the invention of clocks only came about in order to facilitate being on time for things like trains. Prior to that, it didn't matter if your time was a little different from my time because they were close enough. That's also why we have time zones. It's also why people get jet lag from traveling east. It's a whole thing. If Earth is flat, everybody on Earth is going to have an identical sundial. If the Earth is not flat, your sundial may have a different shaped sort of loop around it from your friends, and the shadow will point slightly differently at the same time as theirs. There's the Humber Bridge experiment, which could be performed on any sufficiently large structure. Basically, the premise is that if the Earth is flat, vertical columns will be the same distance apart at the top and at the bottom. But if the Earth is curved, they'll be a different distance apart. So the first step was determining the plumb line for each column and determining that they were in fact straight up and down and not tilted. And then the second was to measure the distance at the bottoms and the distance at the tops. And what they found was that the tops were farther apart, which indicates a curve. The next two that I have for you before I just go into list mode are double sunset and antipode. I hope I'm pronouncing antipode correctly. It might be antipode. Basically, it's the concept that there's an opposite point on the globe for each person. And if you, in your city, like say for example Seattle, were to call someone in its opposite city, which I'm just going to assume is somewhere in Australia, they would be experiencing night while you're experiencing day, and vice versa. If you were to call them and they were experiencing the same time as you, that would indicate that the Earth was flat. However, if they're experiencing the opposite time of day from you, that indicates that the Earth is a spheroid. And lastly, the double sunset. This one's pretty fun. It's pretty cheap. You can do it at home, or if your home is a one-story like mine, you can do it at any two-story building. You basically stand downstairs, look out your window, and watch the sunset. Once the sun is completely gone down, run upstairs and look out the window, and you'll be able to see the sunset again. It's that simple. And what that indicates is that the sunset the disappearance of the sun is a product of perspective on a curve, the horizon line, as opposed to the actual disappearance of the sun, which is what it would be on a flat plane. In list form, other things that indicate a globe are map grid distortion, GPS, seasons, weather patterns, weather system rotation, so like hurricanes turning one direction on the northern hemisphere and a different direction on the southern hemisphere, the existence of satellites, celestial movement, jet lag, which I mentioned before, and the ability to physically observe it for yourself as a curve during high altitude flights and space travel. So with all of that, there are a large number of ways that you can go outside, or even from in your house in some cases, if your house is big enough, you can test and verify that the Earth is in fact a globe, or rather a spheroid round shape and not a flat plane. And I would highly encourage you not to take my word for it, to actually do it, and to comment below what you find out, because this is cool. Science is cool, and I think everybody deserves to be able to do it for themselves. Like always, if you like the video, please hit the like button. If you are interested in more of this sort of thing, please go ahead and subscribe. I will try to post weekly videos on various popular science topics explaining how they work, and if there's a grift involved. Thanks again for listening and watching and liking and subscribing.